Ryan Hartman, Human Resources Manager.
Ben Goodrow, Fire Chief.
Ryan Austin, District 1.
Jake Kavanaugh, Committee Member.
Dennis Pollock, Committee Member.
Steve Vetterman, District 2.
Michael Tim, District 7.
Julie Tim, Community Member.
Jeff Metzger, District 4.
All right, we'll call the meeting order 5:01. Agenda item number 1, call the meeting order. Number 2, HR update.
Thank you, Chair. We are, as I said, I think at the last meeting, we're in the process of hiring for the aquatics and all our seasonal and summer help, so ranging anywhere from 40 to 60 individuals, either on returning employees or new employees, so busy time for us there, as well as still looking to fill the temporary firefighter position at the fire department, along with a couple of police officers, and one in their office position. So I got a few openings, and anybody watching, the postings are online. A couple expired as of last Friday, so we'll be setting up the interview process to go through the applicants and looking at their qualifications, and we'll be setting up those interviews in the coming weeks. So that's pretty much all I have. As it is Public Service Recognition Week, so thank you to all of our employees here at the city. Your work and help does not go unnoticed or unappreciated, and we've got just done some little treats for them at all departments and locations, some chips, salsa, etc., considering it was Cinco de Mayo today, so we thought that played well. So other than that, I think we're ready to move on unless there's other questions.
Anybody else have any questions for Director? Okay, then moving on to number 3, discussion led by the mayor regarding the fire department staffing levels.
Yeah, thank you. I already kind of been having talks with everybody and just kind of sharing information, let you know what's going on. Chief Goodrow is here with us today. I appreciate him being here. I appreciate him being in this position, the ability to communicate effectively and have conversations about not only what the fire department needs, but also to understand on a bigger level what the community needs, and being able to listen to what I have to say, bringing it from different directions, has been very good. So I very much appreciate that. We've been able to, find common ground in terms of, talking about what the fire department needs immediately, short or medium term and long term, but also looking at what that means to the city in the same, short, medium, and long term. The big thing that we've been talking about for the short term to get the fire department in a position where they have access to 4 ambulances at all times. Chief Goodrow opened up the conversation about switching the minimum to 10 instead of 9, meaning we have 12 person crews for all three shifts that are on. And we were set, when we were at 11 2 years ago, we were at 9 minimum. When we went to 12 in that area, we stayed at 9 minimum. So what we're asking now is to go to a 10 minimum, and what that means, in my mind, most importantly, is that we have access to 4 ambulances on the road, and when we have 4 ambulances out, that leaves 2 people, I should say, back at in the station. And that is there for the ability to handle a fire call if necessary. When they're down to 2 people, they call in. They'll be calling in 2 people instead of 3 when the minimum was 9. So that allows us to call in 2 people instead of 3. Each time those people are called in, it's 3 hours. They're paid for 3 hours right off the bat for that original hour. So in the end, what we're asking for is to have a minimum of 10, and typically that doesn't affect us because we have 12 people with 2 off on every shift. So when we look at that minimum of 10, right now we have 2 of the crews filled, because we have full crews. One of them right now is FMLA. One of those persons is off on FMLA, and so that tier would have to be filled with calling in that person for overtime. Right now, we're looking at a shift from, we kind of agreed on a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift instead of a 24-hour shift. They'd be doing a 12-hour shift. I am kind of asking to see if we can't even shorten that up a little bit, if we can see when those times come in, you know, if that window is actually smaller, but at the same time, it's a little bit of a hit and miss because you don't necessarily know when those calls are going to be coming in between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. But ultimately, we want to make sure we keep the cost down as much as possible, but yet keep the coverage there when we need it. So we'll be looking at that one crew being filled with that overtime position. We did have another one open when Chief Eckes retired, but that has now since been filled, but there'll be some training and
Yeah,
and
just
stuff
started
going.
Monday.
Okay, so that's the other one. And then we also have another thing coming up later, which is we've already filled that position with a gentleman that's gonna be going overseas for military.
And that's the one that Ryan was talking about that we're still attempting to fill.
Okay. So if that one's filled, then we will be sitting at, we'll be full for the two crews and working on being full for the other one with the FMLA, and when they come off, then, but we do struggle to keep that at that minimum of 10 level.
Yeah.
So that's the short term that we've been looking at. Longer term, Chief Goudreau and I talked earlier. I'll go into this first before we go to the other side. We have had conversations about another tier, which would be at an EMT level. That would be 3, 1 for each tier at an EMT level. So they would basically be filling in, and we'd be utilizing them to help out with this community care. That's not the right word. Working with the co-responder that I'll be talking about in a minute. We would try to structure it a little bit more like that, where the EMTs could help us handle some of the non-emergency calls, and then these folks would be the first ones to be hired into permanent positions,
Mhm.
and then they'd have to go through school and be trained as such, but it would act as kind of a feeder for that program. We're not going there yet, but it is something that could possibly be talking about if what we're working on first doesn't work. So what Chief Goudreau's working with me on, or all of us on in the community, is to work on bringing the call volume down first. And if we can do that, then we alleviate the pressure on the existing firemen and paramedics that we have. So there's 2 programs that we're working on. The first one is this co-responder. So her name is Jen Farnborough, and she is a well-respected social worker in the community, has worked in many different departments, has connections to everybody through the work that she's done, which includes ADRC, includes the state county programs outside of that. So she was actually brought on first by Chief Hostins, who when he moved here came from another program in Illinois, and that department had a co-responder, and that's a social worker that when they were done doing the policing that they needed to do, they called in this co-responder to come and be with either the victim or the family, domestic violence, whatever it might be, that they could help get the person to the services that the community already had. That's one thing I've learned in the last year. I just said it earlier today. We have so many resources in this community, but we struggle connecting the people who need the resources to the actual resources. So this is a stopgap measure by starting with the chief. So they're hired by ODC, they're paid for by Legacy. Right now it's a 3-year, $100,000 grant. Housed at the police department, but working more and more now with the fire department, because that's where a lot of the needs are. Granted, when the fire department or police department needs her, she'll be there for them also, but definitely working towards trying to lower this call volume of non-emergency calls, and to see where that leads to, and more opportunities for more positions like this if we can show that it's successful and it's doing the job that we're asking it to do. And if we are, then we would be looking probably for more of that type of a position or a department than paramedic firemen, if that call volume is actually being decreased, and that is the ultimate hope. The other part that we're working on there is I spent some time over the last year reaching out to the community, leadership of the different communities that are around our city here. Everybody's very excited to have the conversation about what EMS is going to look like over the next 10, 20, 30 years and be more of a part of a conversation as to what that looks like. Chief Goudreau and I spent afternoon with a gentleman named James Small from the state level, a ton of experience in trying to help communities bring their resources together, come up with the ideas that are going to work for your specific community, and then move forward with those ideas. The hope there, right now, just our contracts alone are about 20, I'm hearing 20, a little over 20% of our call volume. So it's, 1,000 calls roughly. So we're having different conversations, if it's us that's serving them, what that's going to look like, if we're going to work together, what that would look like. Again, it can convolute a lot of things and add a lot of complexities to the issues. But at the same time, I think we have to look at the big picture and say, we don't mind helping our neighbors, but at the same time, the cost can't be put on the backs of the Wisconsin Rapids residents to do that. So the broader conversation has to be, equality in terms of the services and the money that goes around. So I am reaching out to those communities to set up this initial meeting, and we'll let you know more as we progress as to the results of that. So that being said, I can house some questions now, or I know Chief Goudreau would like to share some information with you. Again, he's very good at putting together information and making sure we have enough statistics to make good decisions without pressuring us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Chairman. If you didn't receive a packet, I have those up here if you want to share with them back there. If you're interested in looking over what we're kind of going to go over. Again, this is a non-actionable item, as I understand it, agenda item. I was grateful that the mayor put it on here. We've been working, as he said, for many months, even before January, in my position on addressing some of the service needs of our community and how that aligns with our staffing model and what we're doing operationally. If you want to scroll, or if you have a paper copy, move through some of it, I can kind of walk through it. My intention on providing a lot of this information here is just so you have something to walk away with, some key metrics, some of the programs and initiatives that we're looking at. Holistically, I kind of call this our community risk reduction program or initiative. There's a lot of different facets that we're attempting to identify within our current operations and our staffing model, as well as the calls for service and the needs of our community to meet those. This is a really dynamic issue within our government and public safety, so one easy answer isn't going to solve one issue that we're having. So the first page is kind of key statistics. This is from our annual report. It kind of walks down, the population that we have, average personnel on duty, our response time in minutes, and then how much time it takes us on scene to render care and transport someone, or that would include also our fire responses. But on average, 55 minutes it takes us to commit to each incident before it's mitigated and we're available, or that unit is available again. This is a graph, the third page is a graph that you've probably all seen before. It's just kind of our staffing levels since 1991. And then over on the blue is the call volume, which continues to rise, as you can kind of see. We've had ups and downs, but it seems to be on a trend of 5 to 7 years. It takes a big jump up again. The fourth page here, community risk threshold comparison. This is just kind of a brief synopsis of when you're building a public safety system. What you want to do is, what we're basically doing is risk management every day. The ideal utopian fire department or police department is going to have thousands of, on-call ready responders for every incident, but we know that that's not feasible. So you try to build a model that aligns with the community's needs. Based on the needs, then you set a staffing level to appropriately manage incidents as they come in. In here, on the next page, you'll see it kind of breaks down that graphic. It has a community's risk tolerance, so how much tolerance of risk are you willing to take on. It has staffing levels going across the top, and then it has that on the bottom percentage of maximum risk. So you can see a lot of the communities that are very similar to us regionally, and then I also included West Bend because they're a department that's very like Wisconsin Rapids for the size of their call volume, the services that they provide, firefighter, paramedic, hazardous materials, various services are very similar to us, so I included that even though it's not in our region. But in parentheses, you can see the staffing levels at each of those agencies coming into 2025, as I was alluded to. The call volume would be 2024 call volume.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
The staffing, you mentioned staffing levels in parentheses.
Yeah.
Stevens Point at 40, is that including their
New referendum. Yes.
The firefighters with the referendum?
Yep.
Okay.
And then I did talk to Chief Moody. They have different ways of denoting call volume. Many agencies denote as one incident. They do in one incident, they count how many vehicles go to that incident, and that's the number of calls sometimes they have. So 4,902 is actually the number of response vehicles they've had going to incidents. So it's not apples to apples. The call volume there in Stevens Point, the number of incidents is actually lower than 4,902 is what he provided me. So, if we move on to the next one, the mayor spoke about this. This is a co-responder initiative. This outlines the scope in which Jen, as he had spoke to, will be working with our agency on. We'll be, today was Pivot Day, we called it. So we pivoted and just from doing ADRC referrals now to incorporating this co-responder who connects individuals in our community with non-emergent EMS needs or just individual EMS or non-emergent resource needs, and she'll connect those. So it talks a lot about the key responsibilities that she's incorporating within our community. She's an excellent collaborator with many different resources, including the county, private services, public services, kind of that wraparound care, and she's going to really give the community the best connection to resources that aren't appropriate to call 911 for anymore. It has on some of the measurable goals in the bottom, really just dealing with a holistic approach to public safety by connecting those community members who frequently overutilize emergency services in lieu of non-emergent community resources, as the mayor had spoke to. When you're looking at a lot of these models, I kind of reached out to a lot of different communities. They have different ways of addressing this in their community. I know Wausau and I believe Stevens Point try a community paramedic program, and that's an individual that works, say, Monday through Friday and follows up and does a lot of what this co-responder is also doing, but with a little bit different approach. They're utilizing a paramedic with licensure through the state, whereas Jen is not licensed through the state as an EMS provider. She's more of that social work. So which model is better? I think there's a lot of mixed data, but my best hope from looking and understanding these models best, if we could have a reduction by 10% of our call volume for some of these non-emergent, that would be a very excellent goal to obtain. The next couple pages are what looks like her monthly co-responder report. So she puts together a report monthly. I just wanted to include that in there. Her report obviously only includes WRPD right now, but into May, now that we are incorporated into this program and she's going to be working with us, you'll see metrics and data kind of to show some of the sustainability and potential decrease in call volume on that side of things. Kind of has an April highlights to summarize. And then the last portion of the packet that you'll see is kind of that proposal that the mayor is talking about for hiring 3 additional firefighter EMT basics. This would supplement our staffing. you know, really identify our main goals of adding additional people is to fully meet NFPA 1710 compliance on some days, depending on staffing models. We're reducing firefighter injury and stress-related illnesses, strengthening emergency response capacity within the community with rising needs. We're enhancing the cost efficiency and reducing taxpayer burdens that are related to overtime right now to fill these positions. And then we're just protecting critical infrastructure throughout the community. So, I think I did note in there something of significance was in the, so we're kind of coming to a hedge with this, and this is why this is kind of coming in front of you more significantly. We've had delays in calls, so in March alone we had 3 times where we were significantly delayed to 911 calls, and I can outline those if individuals have more information that they want. Significantly delayed in this metric would be 20 minutes or greater. In April alone, there was 4 times where we were not able to respond to a 911 call, and there weren't other agencies or mutual aid that were able to call upon, so we had to put them in what we call the queue and wait for 20 minutes or more. The final page here is just that requisition of what financially, in summary, these positions would add. They start at a collective bargaining agreement, which is within the city at $54,000. And best practice on this is adding an additional 30% for benefits, which total up $211,000. Those are some of the options, and the summary of the report, you'll obviously take that with you. There's a lot to go over in that.
Go ahead.
So, I got some questions, but
Yeah, which page we did.
I'm gonna start with page 2, the historical run volume staffing ratio.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you just look at the graph at a high level,
Yeah.
you see the trend overall, but I want to focus in right on the spike, because that's about
Which one?
the most recent one, the one where it looks like at between
23 and 24.
no, if we go back a few years, so let's say 2019 to 2020.
Okay.
And then, you know, it kind of continues from there. Obviously, during that time was COVID, but then as COVID has come down, it's kind of maintained. Also at that time, and someone can fill in more information on this, but that was when we took on additional contracts, which the number thrown out earlier was about 1,000.
Yep.
So, you know, at 5,000, if we drew that line down 1,000, you know, really return back to 2019 levels. If for just Wisconsin Rapids.
Yeah, 2019 our call volume was 3,937, so if you're using that math, it would be 1,000. Yeah, you would be right at about that level.
So now we're 6 years post COVID, but we kind of maintain these COVID numbers, and based on the data, we can almost directly correlate that to taking on the additional contracts. Is what I'm reading from it. So I just wanted to point that out when looking at this graph that you know, pre those contracts and about when COVID happened. So it'd be hard to say, you know, if it probably wouldn't be less because 1,000 is 1,000, but we would most likely return down to that level if we were only making rounds in Wisconsin Rapids, which then, you know, makes it hard to, for me while you were going through this, it makes it hard to look at the rest of the data and apply it, not from Wisconsin Rapids Fire Department, but, you know, needs of Wisconsin Rapids, like if we were to just look at Wisconsin Rapids. Because that, you know, whatever formula you use would have to be ran through at different numbers.
Yeah, I could tell you that on average, the city itself increases its call volume by about 9% every year. The outlying areas increase their call volume by 3%, just to give you a kind of an idea of, you know, where that number sits for call volume increases.
then another question I had was, so you mentioned the queue,
Yeah.
the 20+ minute response time for
Yeah,
some
20
calls.
plus, yep.
How many of those were in Wisconsin Rapids?
Let me see here. I don't see any outside of Wisconsin Rapids.
Okay, so that was my question, but I think that's important to note that for those watching that are residents, that number does not necessarily reflect their level of care, but the level of care of some of the meters they're contracted with that are also farther away, so further drive time. And then regarding the proposed program, I just wanted to know how the state law regarding, is it maintenance effort? Is that the right terminology?
Maintenance of effort. MOE.
Yeah, maintenance of effort, so how that applies to these three positions. Is this similar to when we hire on a new firefighter, paramedic, that, you know, we need to maintain those levels potentially forever until that state law changes? Or is this a flexible program where, because they're not full firefighter, paramedics, you know, we could kind of take that program up on a yearly or biannual basis?
So the way I understand that maintenance of effort is there's 4 kind of metrics that they look for, and you have to fulfill 2 of them to continue that maintenance of effort. If you don't fulfill at minimum 2 of them, your shared revenue is significantly impacted.
Right.
3 of them that I oversee or would sign off on is the staffing level, which that pertains to this. Funding or allocation to the department, that needs to stay in the same, if not greater, and that doesn't include capital improvements, right? So like, let's say this, the new fire truck, right? That doesn't include that, so, you know, the next year when we aren't buying a fire truck, it doesn't look like a decrease in your funding for that department. And then the third one that's within ours that I'm very concerned about is our response time. So if that's significantly impacted, then you begin to jeopardize that maintenance of effort too.
Did I hear this, did I understand this correctly? We want to do the EMT program because they are not included in the maintenance of effort until after
They would eventually be in the collective bargaining agreement, and they would be, I wouldn't be able to cut out certain positions without negotiating something with the union.
So they weren't in that position until after they were hired as a fireman, paramedic, went through the training, and a year after they graduate, then they would be in the.
Yes, they would be on probation, but they would still be an employee of the department, which falls under the collective bargaining agreement. Do you know what I'm saying? So they would still be staffing and be subject to the maintenance of effort. So we wouldn't just be able to arbitrarily let them go at some point. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, but that's not that was not what I understood in our previous conversation about this. Which is why it's, you know, so what I'm understanding now is if we do bring on those 3 EMT firemen, then they will be part of the maintenance of effort, and we won't be able to have the flexibility to, which is why we could consider also these, well, I would assume the community paramedic is the same situation then, they're part of the maintenance of effort, so.
Yeah.
But Jen is not, so
Right.
that type of a program gives us some flexibility to be able to work on the call volume without putting ourselves in a situation where we can't move. You know, if we're able to create benefits and help the firemen, paramedics bring that call volume down, we have that flexibility.
How is she paid?
She's paid through the Legacy Foundation for a 3-year grant, $100,000 a year. So, and again, keeping as much data as she can on proof of, you know, what they're doing, as well as the call volume and where that's going, and if it's making an impact. I think ultimately it's going to make an impact regardless. I don't know if we're gonna be able to necessarily show right away that everything she does reduces the call volume, because it's kind of a long-term like, this is all very like societally systemic, like it's not as simple
We might
as-
not show a return on investment, you know, per se for a year, you know,
Mhm.
once that program gets going. I mean, I am confident that this type of model, which we've tried here before, can plateau a call volume. I don't think you reduce a community's emergency response needs.
Well,
Right.
again,
So we still have this to deal with, the staffing model. Do you know what I mean? And the percentage of maximum risk for a community's risk threshold, we still have that to address.
Right.
Regardless of whether, you know, she's 7 people or 2
Right.
people.
Yeah, I'm not.
You were
I'm-
talking about
Yeah, I'm not.
months of effort. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, there is additional info. I think it was valuable, but yeah. So the maintenance of effort, essentially any additional staffing that is allocated to the fire department
Yes, would
becomes
fall
that
under that,
new
yes.
level. So whether it's adding firefighter paramedics or creating this new program, we would have to sustain those levels again, essentially.
Yes, ongoing.
Long term, maybe it could be forever, and unless that law is repealed. So I just want to go back to, you know, all the needs that we're talking about, community, these other things. It's my belief, and looking at this graph, especially, you know, when you got a call volume of 20% or 1,000 calls out to contracted services, and then you're looking at taking on additional staffing to maintain responding to that call volume, and then we create this maintenance of effort which we have to sustain forever, but the contracts aren't obligated to stay with us forever. So if we were to say, hey, we actually want you to fully cover the cost or cost share with us, they could sign a contract for 2 years. You know, someone comes in and undercuts us, or they decide to do their own program, we're still stuck with that maintenance of effort.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, we had some different proposals as a department over the last year and a half that you probably saw. One included 9, but that's why I'm incrementally proposing a staff change. And with that maintenance of effort, which was new in 2024, brought additional shared revenue to the city. That shared revenue was specifically for police, fire, and EMS to maintain these systems. I spoke to Tim, and he advised me that that money was utilized for assisting with wage increases in 2024 citywide, and then the police department added 2 additional members. So ongoing in 2025, I'm sure that we got that extra 906,000. So there are some revenue streams that we could utilize. The GEMT bill is another one that's coming in. That's going to catch us back up from Medicaid. So if we go out and provide a service to an individual in the community, our reimbursement rate for someone on Medicaid is pretty limited, but it costs us still the same amount to provide that service. So that bill is going to catch us up, which dates back to 2023. So they'll do a catch up year for 23, 24, and then going forward, that's a sustained revenue source as well. So
Chief, do you have an estimate on how much additional revenue that would bring in each year?
I wish I did. I met with the finance department a week and a half ago, and we allocated which sections of that report each department was going to finalize. The fire department completed theirs as of Friday, and the finance department was working on theirs. That report is due no later than the end of May, so I would anticipate mid-May here we'll have an estimate of how much that looks like. But very conservatively, I'm looking at $250,000
From the shared revenue.
from the GEMT. The shared
Okay.
revenue is 906,000.
So this is a new revenue source?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, because I did check on, I heard before about the shared revenue in relation to police, fire, et cetera.
Yeah.
I did check on it. I mean, there is restrictions on it, but according to the league, that's not necessarily where it needs to go, but that, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say what we did.
No, I'm not saying that it was
Yeah.
unfairly spent. I'm just saying that that was an additional revenue that was intended for bolstering fire, police, and EMS in agencies like ours who are struggling to meet their
Yeah.
community's needs.
Yeah. I understand that. I think that was the intent when the bill was first started, but when
It's evolved, and
yeah.
then right at the end hour, as I understand it, they added in some provisions where you could use it for street repairs and stuff like that. So some things got kind of thrown in as they usually do, but that was the original intent of that money.
Yeah, and I would just, and this is all I got, but I would just round back to, you know, as we consider all this, I think we need to consider the contracts and the benefit to them, which is in return, hopefully, the department is able to bring in more revenue, but it seems like we're falling behind on what that revenue brings in versus what the staffing cost is, and that we, you know, first prioritize the citizens of Wisconsin Rapids, and that's all I have.
I wish this was a business model where our revenue continues to grow faster than our expenditures, but being in public government, I don't know that any model exists where you're providing a service that is less expensive than the revenue we're bringing in, but that's obviously
No,
to
I mean-
reinforce what you're already saying.
Yeah, for the contracts, you know, those are
Yeah.
different communities, not our residents, you know, as far as emergency services for Rapids, yeah,
Yeah.
certainly that.
I just want to throw it out there that those contracts are roughly in the ballpark of $600,000 a year between the contract payments and the Medicare, Medicaid payments. So it's, as we've talked, you know, we've kind of understood that it's not as simple as, you know, it's a big conversation to say, okay, if we do get let go of the contracts, we're also dealing with the $600,000 loss of revenue, and then figuring out how to fill those gaps because maintenance of effort to keep the level at the staffing at the level that it's at now. So, yeah, it'll be a big conversation to go down that path. Rightly so, though, needs to be had.
And a few of those contracts come up this
Yep.
end of this year, so.
And I would just like to add to both the mayor and Mr. Catnall's point, if you look at that page 2 in that graph, you know, I agree that the citizens are priority number one, in making sure that the fire department staff adequately to respond to Wisconsin Rapids citizens. I just want to point out, if you drew a line at beginning at 2019 at 4,000 runs, that's what they were at in 2019 before they took on those contracts. If you look at the discrepancies, in 1991, you can see where staffing was and where the call volume is. And that essentially flips in 2019. Their staffing level is slightly increased, but their call volume is drastically increased. So that's a complete reversal, indicating that prior to taking on those additional contracts, the argument probably could have been made they had staffing in. So I just wanted to make that point because we're pointing out, you know, the priority to respond to and be able to respond to Wisconsin Rapids citizens. So.
Kind of a historical perspective that was significant in 2019 is the department saw the increase in call volume, and they were provided an option of losing their administrative assistant and providing one additional firefighter paramedic, and that's what they chose to do then.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Chief, do you have any data on how many of the 911 calls turned out to be non-emergent?
There's a lot of, it's difficult to say only because there's sometimes individuals who are not transported, and one could, I guess, make the assumption that that wasn't emergent. But sometimes we do provide on-scene care. So like, let's say, you know, you have a family member that has diabetes and they have low blood sugar. We would go start an IV, administer dextrose, get them feeling better, do follow-up care with them, you know, on scene, and then not transported. So in that event, that would be an emergent call, but it's difficult to delineate that that was a non-emergent, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
It's always difficult to say an outcome was non-emergent, right? Let's say you have just extremely bad abdominal pain. We administer some medications, give you some fluids, you get transported, you get down to the ER, you end up having, say, a CT, and they say, you just got really bad indigestion, you know, so was that an emergency? I mean, I guess that's, you know, very subjective, so it's always difficult to say the outcome is non-emergent in nature, but we do track quite a bit of the non-emergent, and you can see it on the bottom. Actually, it's not in this report, but it could get you, if you looked at our annual summary, you'll see that a significant category for us is falls or invalid assists, and we go on quite a bit of those, a little over 1,000 a year. sometimes those can be emergent in nature where somebody's been laying on the ground for up to 8 hours, and there's some breakdown in, say, muscle and things that lead to what's called rhabdomyolysis. So depending on how long somebody's actually been laying on the ground, or let's say it's a elderly person in a garage laying on the ground, they could have, dementia or whatever it be, but they could get dehydrated, hypothermic, whatever it be. So again, not all falls are non-emergent either. So that's always difficult to delineate.
Okay, thank you.
So in talking with, I believe it was James Small from the state, and I've talked to other people, like right now the federal average is 70% non-emergency calls are in that mix. And I know we're talking about 10% right now to say if we can knock down the non-emergency calls 10% from our existing volume, be about 500, 600 calls, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
Which
that
would be great.
That would be great.
But we're still somewhere
We're still at
between
40.
10% and 70% of wherever that number is, the more we can attack it. And it's not just,
Yep.
older folks that are in their houses that need help but don't know how to get the help, the assisted living places that are abusing our system right now by calling us instead of having on staff for their for-profit companies to come and make sure that their folks that are paying them to take care of them are doing that. There's a host of things that we can tackle, as well as just getting people an alternative number, because right now, we had just met earlier with Jen, so we talked through all this stuff, and these were all brought to the table. And we have to have a plan for attacking all of those, attacking's probably not the right word, but just addressing all of those situations, so that obviously we don't want to not care for our residents, that's why we're here. But at the same time, we want to stop the abuse or the misuse. I think people just don't know any better, so they call 911, and once they call, we have to respond. But if they have an alternative to another source or resource that can help them, that's what we have to get out to the community. And it's like, I equate it back to what you talked about, and the fire personnel have talked about. Like, there was a time when fires were really, really prevalent. So then, instead of continuing to grow firemen, they said we need to really focus on educating people to stop the fires before they start. And it was really, really successful over those years. And I think we're at a crossroads now with the EMS services, 911 services, that we have to focus on stopping the calls before they come at 911. And I think we can do that, and we're off to a good start. So.
Yeah. Our problems are not unique in Wisconsin Rapids, so don't feel as though we created a problem ourselves that is unique only to our area. But as James Small said, and he'll, when he talks, he's got a lot of different, solutions from different communities that they've done, and we've kind of talked to him at length about that. I mean, it's probably a 4-hour meeting.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And for, I understand there's 2 pieces of legislation that are being drafted and discussed. One is to increase those treat and release, or those
Yep,
no transport
on-scene
calls.
care, yep.
Increase the reimbursement for those, Medicare, Medicaid. And the other one was to provide funding for training for new paramedics.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair?
Yep, that's great.
Ben, I have just a couple questions
Yeah.
here from the mayor's presentation, but now, if you have 4 ambulances that are out and you get a call, how do you handle that, or who do you call, or?
And that's what I kind of detailed in that report in March and April. So what we always do, our protocol is to call for what's called mutual aid. So we'll look for another agency that's able to take that call for us, because we don't have the resources.
But you only would have 1 ambulance.
But if
so
we
would
don't
you-
have anyone, then they go into what we call the queue, or a delayed response.
Okay, but you
So
would
we'll-
be able
we'll
to
attempt
answer
to-
the call, though, I
Yeah,
guess.
we wouldn't be able to for
Okay.
usually 20 minutes or more, and that's where that threshold was, is within 20 minutes, if we can't get there, it's going into what's called a queue system, and it's a delayed response. And that call could be benign, non-emergent, or I had one on April 1st where there was gas, natural gas filling up in a basement, and it took us over 20 minutes to get there.
Okay.
Can I just
Yeah, go
interject?
ahead.
How is United playing into the picture, knowing that they're there as a
Good. Yep. And we've always had that relationship. I've told my staff that we will, before we put something in the queue in the city, we will contact them if it's an EMS need, or our partners on the fire side if we have something. But again, something's not gonna, or something only gets put in this queue or delayed response if we've already called our mutual aid partners and they are unable to respond for us.
Okay. Then the other question I had now, when you got down, you had just 2 people left at the station and a fire call or any kind of a call comes in. How do you handle that? And if you call people in, how long would it take for you can get a
Yeah.
truck out on the road?
Yep, and that kind of plays into or equates to a lot of that delayed response. Those individuals are coming from home, they're responding
Right.
from that call, so sometimes it can take them 20 minutes to get there in service and then respond to that call. When we call someone in for a call-in, that's an emergency call to the station, they have 15 minutes to respond from home, drop everything, get to the station within 15 minutes. Obviously, some of them geographically a little closer. We don't have residency in the fire department, which is a great recruitment and retention positive. But on the negative side, obviously, if you're not in the area, you live, say in Appleton or wherever you might live,
Right.
you might not be able to take a call in at all. It just wouldn't be feasible. So.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Alright, any more discussion on fire department staffing? Anybody else have any? Alright, moving on to item number 4, discuss and consider for approval revisions to the IT manager job description.
Should be a shorter conversation. I appreciate everybody's part of the discussion there. It's a hugely important topic, so thank you for your participation. With the IT, last month we talked, I came to this committee and then the council to ask to remove WRCM from underneath the IT department and put them online with me. I think that's worked out great. We're in communication every day, working through projects, getting more and more information out to the community. So I think it's been a great decision, and I appreciate that. Definitely gives us the ability to move faster and just get more things done and brainstorm. So I think that's great. But in the meantime, taking that out from underneath the IT department, what we kind of talked about, I talked at length with Tyler, just kind of working through what they're doing now, what they want to be doing in the future, and what we need as a community organization. One of the biggest things that filled some of that time gap was, there's different words for it, but it's knowledge sharing, knowledge management, meaning internal. We're still working with all the new IT that's come our way in the last couple of decades, and really trying to figure out how to organize it, manage it, store it, and also have the platform set up to move into the future as an organized, cohesive team inside the organization. So that's kind of what we've put into this new job description, is more of that knowledge management, making sure that internally we are communicating effectively, utilizing all the tools at our disposal to make sure we're doing the best job for the community. So that's where the changes came in with that job description, and just hoping everybody can see that and see the good. And if there's any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Well, Mr. Mayor, right now, he answers to you, right?
IT manager, yes, reports directly to me.
Have you ever thought of having him report to some committee? Because right now, the committee really doesn't meet with them.
I haven't thought about that. I think the very interesting thing about IT is that, a lot of departments overlap with other departments, maybe one or two, or, we're all interconnected.
Right.
But IT, as well as human resources, and I guess the mayor, are the only three that interact with everybody on a pretty deep, significant level. So it is a very important department. I've never thought about having its own, oversight to kind of have a committee there to talk about. Certainly we can talk more about that. Ultimately, when he has things that he wants to bring forward, usually we find a way to bring
Right.
it through the other three committees. But ultimately, yeah, he does a good job just kind of running the show that way.
I guess I was just comparing the county's position versus
Mhm.
what we have here.
Yeah, so
I
you're
realize
saying,
it's a little different.
yeah, you're saying develop a new committee, a IT
Well,
committee.
I'm just not suggesting, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
asking you.
Yep. No, that's good. I understand what you're saying. We can give it some thought and talk more about it, you know.
Okay, that's-
See,
that's
I would
fine.
like to bring them in and see if they feel the need to expand to that
Mhm.
degree, or if they feel their needs are being met, and being able to move.
Well, it'd be kinda nice if we got really like a written report or something every month,
Mhm.
what, you know, what contracts or
Sure.
whatever he's doing, or he has problems, or, you know, just
Yeah, yeah.
a little bit more of an insight of what goes on in his department.
Yeah, I think it's a good conversation. I meet with them, everybody, all the department heads once a month before the committee meetings. So I'll be meeting with Tyler again, and I'll bring that to him. I'm sure he'll be happy to write out a report every month and kind of bring
bet he
some
will.
stuff to the table.
Okay,
But
thank
they
you.
are doing, they are doing a lot of stuff, and
Yeah,
I
I
think
understand that.
to shed some light on it would be a great thing.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yep.
I don't mind the IT manager reporting directly to the mayor. I mean, you're an elected official too, so.
Hmm.
I haven't seen a job description, and there was no online packet, so I was wondering
Yeah.
if anybody had one. Was it in an email?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to resend it to you quick?
Yeah.
Here, Jake.
Okay, thank you. All good.
Okay.
I'll give you some time to look at that and then so we're on item number 4, the approval and consider for approval the revisions to the job description. Anybody entertain a motion, I guess?
I'll make a motion to approve the revisions to the IT manager job description.
I'll second it. Motion by Alder Catmull, seconded by Pollock. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3.
I'd like to add one more thing if I could.
Yeah.
Just want to let everybody know, like, these, you know, the IT department, they're kind of like the unsung heroes. They're always behind the scenes. They, you know, you call them and they're there, and then they disappear and your stuff's still working. And I think, if you can take some time to show them some appreciation, everybody loves to hear that, and I think they do a great job for us. So, and we're always working and talking through new ideas and what's coming in the future, and trying to stay on top of that cutting edge level and balance that out with the money that it costs. So they do a great job. So thank you for them.
How do you find Tyler in his office? I always have trouble catching him in his office. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
if I would call ahead of time, make an appointment, but.
Well, he is the IT guy, so if you use IT, Dennis, and you know, text him or something, you know, you catch him.
Better to get up.
No. But yeah, if you usually reach out to him by text or something, you can usually figure it out. But yeah, he's not sitting around too often, so.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
thank
always
you.
something going on.
They definitely do good work, and they got a big project on their hands with that new website coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's coming along.
All right, moving on to item number 5, discuss referral from Alderperson Catmull to consider providing a short-term disability policy for the city employees. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'll just go to Ryan first. Ryan, can you explain, not FMLA, because I think everybody is probably familiar with it, but let's say there is some type of leave outside of what an employee takes on their PTO. How is their pay addressed during that leave?
So you're asking they're on FMLA?
Or they're on leave for another reason, but it is not, you know, their standard vacation, any type of PTO.
Well, typically they wouldn't have paid or any unpaid leave. The only time, I think what you're referring to, so currently our policy is written, if somebody's on FMLA, they are paid for 8 weeks. It used to be 12. They are paid for 8 weeks during that duration. Okay? Now, if they need to utilize the full 12 weeks of FMLA granted by law, then they have to supplement the 4 remaining weeks. Or if they're in PD or fire, which are contractual obligations, they can come back and request, as you saw at the or as we did at the last, I think it was the April meeting, for an extension. But those are bargained contracts or negotiated items. And they can go for another 3 months of leave.
Right.
For a total of 6. That runs concurrently with the FMLA. If those expire, their job then can be, they can ask for a potential leave of absence, but that would have to come to myself and the HR committee to take a further unpaid leave of absence. Or if they then do have paid time remaining following that, they can use it at that time. Yep. Does that clarify? Otherwise, we really don't have, if somebody's off, we do have a unpaid leave policy for certain things, like if you're going on a sabbatical, you're requesting to do a sabbatical or a harvest of some sort, you can request for like a week or 2 to take unpaid leave.
Right. Or military, right?
Or what?
Or military,
Obviously,
right? 'Cause
military
obviously you'd
leave.
be,
Yeah, but that
deployed.
obviously is, you said,
Different.
not FMLA related.
Right. But I would guess the majority of those type of leaves are under FMLA.
Not the sabbatical, not
I
the.
understand that, but like, the majority of leaves taken in the city under that time span.
Long-term leave of absence.
Right.
Are mostly FMLA qualifying.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so what I was getting at in my referral is, as you heard currently, I mean, we're paying out full for those types of leave. There's some, sounds like are contractually negotiated that can be longer. Looking at like the private sector, I mean, what you'll typically see is the option to FMLA does not necessarily entitle you to paid leave. It's I didn't know what the policy was that,
Correct.
or when it was established that we just give full pay for X period of time. But the idea would be to more adopt a system of, we take on a short-term leave policy throughout the city or in the departments where we have the ability to, and move towards that being the way when people take FMLA, instead of just paying out their full lump sum out of the general fund or, you know, budgeted funds, we could adopt a short-term leave policy which may be less expensive to the city than paying out fully for FMLA leave. So that's the idea behind it, or at least to start getting some numbers on exactly what that costs versus what a short-term disability or other disability policy would cost the city.
So I kind of got the feeling when I called last week, after the referral, I kind of had a feeling where that might be going, so I have reached out. I'm just waiting for stuff to come back. I had to fill out a couple census reports to send out. Obviously, with public safety being involved, our rates are going to be probably dramatically higher than a private sector with 200 employees, but they're going to look at the whole package and give us potential options. And there are a couple, that could be out there, and then we could bring those back to at least look at. I think it's a dual, double-edged sword that we're kind of looking at is, so, and I've talked with Ben about this too in police. So somebody's out on leave and they're receiving their full pay,
Right.
their normal paycheck. That stuff is already budgeted for, right? That's in their payroll, because they would technically be on shift. So I'm getting paid for fire instance, I'm getting paid my 24-hour shift, 48-hour shift. I'm getting paid for that. The cutting part of the sword comes in when you have to have minimum staffing levels.
Correct.
And now we're paying the overtime to bring the PD or fire individuals back. The other departments, for the most part, if somebody goes on leave at wastewater treatment plant or the streets, they don't have people to call back in off of shift, because they're on shift, they're already there working 7 to 3 or 8 to 5, or if you're the mechanics, you're working 2 to 10. So their overtime numbers aren't really impeded by a FMLA qualifying event. So it's the minimum staffing levels that they need to hold dear that really puts those overtime numbers into play. So I think that's the caveat to it. But you could, if you are looking at the short term, which typically will pay 66 2/3
Right.
of the pay, and then the employee could supplement the other 1/3. There is one policy out there that they could pay up to 75%. The carrier could pay 75%, the disability company would pay 75% of the employee. The employee would then have to find supplement the other 25% if they so chose. With that with that policy, I am seeing, and just for instance, we can come back with more specifics next month. A lot of those policies have a 30-day window in them. So somebody goes out on leave, those first 30 days, the employee is on the hook for. So their short-term disability is not gonna kick in until that 30-day expiration window. Then their 75% kicks in. So that's just in the spirit of, short-term leave and then long-term disability after that. But yeah, definitely something we can. I have reached out to a couple other municipalities as well, just to see how they're operating in their public safety and then their non-represented classes.
Yeah.
To see what they have.
Yeah, and you kind of led into it, it being double-edged, and being that we're paying out full rate for those leaves and sometimes needing to call someone in and then pay them overtime. So end game of what, whether it be this committee or a different committee that, if it's finance that would consider purchasing such policy, is if we were able to break the data down of pay, what are we paying out for those leaves, and what would a policy cost? I mean, I haven't seen the quotes, and it sounds like you're looking at them, but I would guess that some type of leave disability policy, short-term, long-term, would cost the city substantially less than paying out full salaries every time someone goes on FMLA leave. And I don't mean this to be like an absolute cost cutting, this doesn't benefit the employee at all, but I just find that this is majority standard practice in the private sector, which means there's something to it. The companies know the numbers, and it's usually worth getting the policies, because if everybody in the city, every employee purchases the policy every year and they don't utilize it, well, typical insurance. So if you don't utilize it every year, then you're paying in, but a certain percentage of people might, and then it kicks in for them, and they're able to supplement their income that way. So I just wanted to bring this conversation because I wasn't aware that we didn't have any insurance on that, and I don't think not paying for leave would be a good idea either. I think moving somewhere in this direction would probably be the most beneficial to the city, with also providing support for employees on leave.
I did, if I can go back quick, Jake, I think I misspoke on the represented sectors. I think they get 3 months. I can pull up the contract language quickly, but I believe it's 3 months, which would be your 12 weeks. Then they can ask for extension of another 3 months or 12 weeks. Non-reps are 8 weeks. Prior to, and this goes back a long, long time to my knowledge, like I said, it used to be 12 full pay. And now it was reduced to 8 prior to my arrival. So over 5 years ago, it was reduced to 8. I don't know the exact date that it was, so, yeah.
If you're dealing though with two unions, does that make a difference though? Is any of this in their contracts? I think
It's
it is.
it's
isn't it?
specifically mentioned in both contracts, and I think Sue is on Zoom. Yeah, she is. And I'm sure those would need to be bargained, anything to deal with sick
But
leave.
would you have, well, that would be a little bit different there though, than trying to do something with the contract or unions versus non-union, wouldn't it? Or don't you see a problem?
Right, this is Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Absolutely. Currently, they are entitled to, you know, I think, did you say, I think it's 8, no, it's 12 weeks.
12 weeks,
Of paid.
yep, 3 and 3.
And the ability to get another 12. So
Yeah.
obviously, if we were going to do something different with that, that would need to be bargained with both of our public safety units. It was at one point that everyone had unlimited sick leave. And that was probably changed maybe, I don't know, 10 years or so. And then it went to basically 12 months. No, actually, I think it was 6 months. And then it went down to 8 weeks for the non-union. And it went from unlimited to the 12 weeks and the 12 weeks with public safety, I believe.
Chief, you had something you were
Yeah,
gonna?
I was just gonna ask Brian, and maybe this is wishful thinking, but there's no type of rider on any of those policies that also bridge, you know, a replacement worker costs
What rider?
for like that short-term disability
Oh.
insurance. There's nothing like that.
I haven't gotten any bids or any
Yeah,
quotes
okay.
or anything, so I don't.
I just figured you're
Yeah.
kinda in that arena and know more
You
about
mean
it.
like basically worker replacement pay?
Yeah, or even a portion of it would help bridge that gap. I mean,
I
I
would-
see where Jake's going with it, is like this would at least have an expected financial liability in the sense of you're purchasing an insurance package.
Mhm.
But then it would also bridge that gap when we do have these incidents, which always occur, and you guys up in HR could probably run, you know what I mean, objective numbers on how often this occurs across
Mhm.
the two bargaining groups, but
Mhm. Yep.
you know, that number alone, like you said, the real financially impactful portion of things is the replacement overtime cost that drives it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely look. I'm not aware of any, like,
Yeah.
you know, because that's typically short-term disability, in my experience, has been that carrier
Just for that
will
person.
then pay the employee directly.
Yep.
It's not coming from the employer to the employee.
Correct.
It's a third party. You have a TPA that administers it, and they take care of it, so. But, yeah, that's, I'm assuming, it sounds like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you want me to get some more information and kind of bring back some ideas, options, is that what?
Yeah.
Obviously, now again, to look at what we were saying, those other two, you know, sectors for public safety units would have to be bargained, so.
Right, understood. But
Okay.
yeah, I think this is twofold, or maybe three. So we need the data on how often that's currently happening and how much it costs the city. I think we need to get numbers on what a policy would cost, and then we would have to potentially update our policy to reflect if we were to move forward with some type of disability policy, we would have to update ours from the 8 weeks full paid to something else.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if you need a motion on that, or if this is enough for you to get that information and bring it back, but something for us to consider.
Yeah, I don't think it's an actionable item. I think you're just telling me to go out and do some home. Sue, would that be right? That's not an actionable item, or does Jake have to make a motion for me to go get more information?
No, a motion would not be necessary.
So, okay.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we can really take any more action than that on number 5 without knowing the costs and some data, so we'll move on. Number 6, we may vote to go into closed session under section 19.851E Wisconsin State Statute, which reads, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties the vesting of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
You wanna read the other part too, I believe, by the way.
Oh, in closed session, the committee will be updated and will discuss negotiation and bargaining strategy regarding labor negotiations with the WRPPA and the IAFF.
Motion to move into closed session.
I'll
Motion-
second it.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's have it.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to stay or go into closed session and I'll leave?